Hello and welcome to this last lecture on Chapter 15. Today we're kind of be putting it all together from the entire semester, and so we'll be talking about social media marketing plan. And so by the time you get through this chapter, you should learn the following things, and that comes from the outline. So we'll be talking about, writing this plan, and when you write this plan, you'll need to come up with a title that grabs the reader's attention. You'll need to create a table of contents, and then we'll talk about also writing an executive summary, which is an overview of the entire plan and convincing someone that has some kind of skin in the game or being a champion, so to speak, that you would convince them to be part of that. We will also cover what it means to do a competitive analysis and then setting goals, and then determining strategies based on that competitive analysis, and then different things that we've been talking about all along and kind of putting them all into the plan. That is, identifying your target market, what platforms you're going to use, how you're going to implement your plan, how are you going to monitor that, and then giving your feedback, how you're going to tune it, and then also tie this into some kind of budgeting and return on investment, and then getting the buy-in from your chief officers, so to speak. So it all starts with a review of the plan that we've been looking at all along, and this came from a previous chapter. And it starts here by how do you go about listening to what is going on in social media. Then we talked about goals, then with strategies, your target audience, tools, implementation, monitor, and then fine tune things. And the process just keeps repeating. So this is what we're doing, and then you need to identify that in your plan. So the first thing we want to talk about is when you're creating this plan, you want to make it as attractive as possible, make it eye-catching, and have a nice text, nice font, something that will stand out. And so here are some guidelines for that in terms of your title page. You want to have a descriptive name, and then you also want to have your company name, contact information, and authors. We'll see this figure on the next page. You want to have a publication date so that people will know how new this plan is and they're not looking at an old plan. You don't want to have a lot of text for somebody to read. They see that, they may be put off thinking that the contents are going to be lots of text as well and be a dry read. I also want to have a sharp title, something that catches their eye and makes them want to read more. So if we look at this example, we see this is about our coffee company, and you can see nice picture here, relates to coffee, the name of the company, what the plan is, contact information, and so this would be considered a good cover page. If you're familiar with Word, then the inside of that document or plan should have a table of contents. Word, you don't want to write the table of contents until you're finished with the entire plan. That way, the table of contents can be generated automatically by looking at your headings and subheadings. And so once you're done with the plan, then you create the table of contents. So then you would have something like the following. So typically you would have your major headings to the left, subheadings indented, and then you have dots all the way out to the pages where those start. The next thing in your plan will be the executive summary, and the executive summary typically will state why the plan should be adopted. Think about who you're writing this for. Is it going to be your chief information officers or your C-suite, chief executive officer, chief security officer. There's all kinds of different C type of positions now. So you want to provide a general overview of what you're planning on doing. Don't make it too long, a couple of pages at most, and then compose the executive summary last. So you might have something like the following would be a nice example. Right, so kind of overview of exactly what people should know, why they should want to go ahead and do it. And then if they want to delve deeper into your plan, they've got the rest of the plan to look at and see the specifics about things. So as you're looking at your overview, you probably want to describe your industry and how you stack up in that industry, what's the future of that industry, and then you want to look at the competitive advantage, and then try and show how you'll get some significant gains by using this marketing plan, and then how the marketing plan contributes directly to what the organization is trying to do strategically. So, some things to be aware of here is don't assume the readers of the plan will really understand social media marketing or how it's going to deliver the results. You're going to have to explain all of that. So an example as we go on is you see here the brief overview. Again, what's going on in the industry, where you fit, and then how that can be useful. Then you want to use some of the techniques that we've talked about, and that is you want to measure your social media brand health, and we can do that through sentiment analysis. So that's looking at the text of what people are responding to. We can look at the reach. How many people are we actually getting to? How many people have followers? How many people have likes? We can look at blogs. We can get that information as well. Some other things you can do is look at the average response time that it takes users to comment on your social media pages or apps, and that would give also how well you're doing on your social media presence. So here we have an example of those measurements on the different platforms. And then, so what type of analysis was done? We've got sentiment, reach, company posts, any kind of feedback, and so on. And here's the average response time, which was one of the last things we talked about. So that would give whoever's reading this plan a feeling for what that social media presence currently is. And so that gives you a starting point of what you want to do with your plan in terms of your goals. The next thing I want to talk about is doing this competitive analysis. One competitive analysis that you can do is called a SWOT analysis. And that looks at your strengths, your weakness, opportunities, and threats. And so what you want to do is look at these in terms of your industry and your competitors. In fact, there's another type of competitive analysis that looks at your 5 forces model. And so you may hear that if you're taking any kind of strategic classes. But we'll look at the SWOT analysis now, since that's what is in your book. And so when we look at that, we're going to look at a matrix of your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and threats. Now, this could be for the company. It could be in terms of how you're using social media, and then how you want to proceed with that. Also note that when we finally get to the next slide here, that if there is a strength and an opportunity together, you're going to see it listed as SO strategy, so a strength and opportunity. So we look at these, you'll see something like this. You might break it down by strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then you'll create a matrix, so opportunities, in terms of strengths and weaknesses that go along with that, and threats in terms of strengths and weaknesses. You can also think about that strengths and weaknesses are internal to the organization. That is, things that you do well, things you don't do so well. And then opportunities and threats are external to the organization. So sometimes you might see it listed as that as well. So here we have another listing of strengths and weaknesses, and it's just an example if we're going back to our original XYZ coffee company. And then we list those out as opportunities and threats in terms of our social media. And then we would eventually do, our competitive analysis. So some options then would be your strength opportunity, weakness opportunity, strength threat, weakness threat. So with your threats, you want to try and minimize those risks, whereas opportunities, you want to capitalize on those and take advantage of what things are going well. So after you've done your competitive analysis, you want to then start thinking about your goals. And so the whole idea about your goals is that they're going to allow you to achieve some kind of competitive advantage. So that's something you do better than your competitors. Now, ideally, you would want to have a long-term competitive advantage or a sustained competitive advantage. So something that you could do better than your competition and that they would have a hard time being able to replicate it in the near future. And so if you notice what goes on a lot of times is that one company will have an advantage for a short period of time, and then the competitors will be able to do the same sort of activities or whatever the competitive advantage is from their competitors, and they'll be able to replicate that, and then there's no longer a competitive advantage. So you're looking for things that are going to help you do a sustained competitive advantage. Sometimes, though, when you look at your industry, it might be to the point that if there are certain things that everybody else is doing and that you're not even doing, that puts you at a competitive disadvantage. So, with the advent of social media marketing, if you look around, you see that just about everybody else in your industry is using it and you're not using it, then that may put you at a competitive disadvantage. And so you want to try to avoid those as well. That gets us back to the doing the SWOT analysis. If you find that that's the case, then you've got to have goals that are going to get you involved in social media marketing if the rest of your industry is using that and you're not. So if we look at this second option here, we see that some of the goals might be, and these are all worthy goals: brand building, increasing customer satisfaction, doing the viral marketing, coming up with new product ideas, or generating leads. Could be also developing something to avoiding your crisis management if you don't have to use it. You can use your social media with public relations. Also look at how you're doing advertising and your search engine optimization. Okay. And so as you go through this process, it's an iterative process, means you're going to have to look at it, you have to revise it, implement it, see if it's working, and then come back and do some alterations and then see if it does any better, and so on. And so you'll see an example here in 15.6. Here might be some goals that you put forth that are in your plan. And then you'll have, okay, how are we going to achieve those goals? And again, we've talked about these before. You can look at Chapter 2, looking at those 8 C's of strategy development, and guidelines for constructing SMM strategies. Right? So then we look at, okay, the overall strategy is customized for this XYZ company as our example. So here we have what we're going to do in terms of our strategies for listening, interacting, engaging, influencing, and connecting. So it lays it out so everybody understands exactly what's going to take place. All right, so as we're doing that, we would also need to identify our target market. Right, so you have that profile, which we've talked about before. And then we'll categorize that target market into different target audiences, and maybe they use different platforms in order to be reached through our social media. We also talked about, define that persona with the Forrester Research social profile. And we'll have examples here of those profiles, the persona of the hypothetical XYZ coffee company. And so you can see here the target market. Here they use that profile. And that's what we're after. And so on. So the book does a good job of giving you examples of different things you need to do as you're building your plan, and then examples of what it looks like. So I'm going to pause right here, and when we come back, we'll be looking at selecting different platforms for our social media plan.